Let me first ask you, what's your full name?
Thomas Frederick Shook, Jr.,
Okay. And what's your birth date?
1/15/21.
Okay. Thank you. So you grew up where?
Valley Crucis, North Carolina.
Okay. And you joined the service.
September 1939,
Okay. And that was the Navy, right?
U.S. Navy.
So that was well before the United States, entered the war. And where'd you have your basic training or your initial training, and what did you do in the Navy?
I had your basic training in Norfolk, Virginia. After that, I was sent to the West Coast and boarded the USS Phoenix, a light cruiser. Had 15 6-inch guns and 8 5-inch anti-aircraft guns. And I served aboard the Phoenix the whole World War II in the South Pacific. Part of that time with the Australian Navy
Oh, okay.
under an Australian admiral.
Do you remember his name?
I don't recall the Australian admiral's name. I don't recall it.
Okay.
But he was on the, I've forgotten what it's, the Canberra or the, what was the other cruiser? It was the Australian cruiser.
Oh, okay. Did you spend some time in Australia?
A little bit on going back to the rear areas for a little rest
Mm-hmm.
from constant action.
Mm-hmm.
We went back for maybe a little over 14 days, something like that.
Okay. So I understand you were at Pearl Harbor when the Japanese attacked.
So
Can you
I
describe
was.
that?
I'd finished breakfast. I went to the canteen, picked up the newspaper, went to the office, and I was reading about the unrest in the Pacific. And all of a sudden I heard gunfire, and I stood up and looked out the porthole. I had one porthole, and I saw the smoke from one of the battleships. It was on fire, and I knew then what was taking place.
Do you know which battleship you saw on fire, or could you tell?
That was Arizona. It was closest to us. I could look through the porthole and see the Arizona, the stern of the Arizona.
Okay. So what was your first thought other than...
I knew what was happening. I also saw one of the enemy planes peel off after dropping the bomb,
Yeah.
and I saw the rising sun on the wing of the plane. And I knew then what was happening.
What was your rank at the time?
At the time, I was a second-class yeoman.
And what was your primary job at the time?
Primary job was with the aviation unit. We had 4 seaplanes. And I kept the records of the seaplanes, maintenance of them, records of all the personnel attached to the aviation unit. Kept the personnel records.
Okay. So When you saw the attack taking place, what did you do at that time?
At that time, I manned the headphones with the bridge. I had communication with the bridge, and I could tell what was going on, and they giving instructions to the crew what to do.
Do you remember any of those instructions, or as it applied to you?
Strip ship for action. And anything lying on deck that was loose, overboard. Throw it overboard.
Did they want to get you out of the harbor?
Yeah. We, most of our high-ranking officers were not aboard ship at the time. The captain or the executive officer. So the senior officer aboard was Lieutenant Commander Irwin. He took command of the ship until the captain arrived and the executive officer. Did a great job getting the ship out of the harbor.
Were you able to make it out of the harbor?
We started out the normal way out of the harbor, and we had a message that there was a miniature sub in the channel.
Uh-huh.
So we turned around, went back out to the other channel. You know, there's an island there,
Yes. Ford Island?
Ford Island. And we went out by the burning battleships. And we got out of the harbor. But that time it's all over.
Yeah. What were you able to do after that? Did you? I'm not sure what kind of action you had to take as a crew member.
We put out to sea and joined some other ships. I don't recall
Okay.
the other ships, but there were minor destroyers, and maybe there's another one or two other cruisers, I think. We joined the other cruisers. Was darkened ship, no lights anywhere. And they had done some rapid fire with one of the 5-inch anti-aircraft guns. It had a bulge or something wrong with the gun barrel.
Uh-huh.
So after things settled down, we made a quick trip to San Francisco to get a new barrel in to the Navy Yard in San Francisco. We turned around and went right straight back and was going to rearm the Philippine naval units. By the time we got there, we were halfway across the Pacific to the Philippines. It was all over for the Philippines. So we went around Australia to the Indian Ocean. Well, they spotted us. The reconnaissance planes spotted us. We were alone. So after we got spotted by a reconnaissance plane by the enemy, we turned around and come back to the Sydney, Australia, and joined the Australian group. And went up into the New Guinea area. And from there we constantly covered landings on New Guinea going north. Finally we got to enough north so we went into the Philippines. with other American ships that joined us there and made a landing in the Philippines. And from there, it was just making step by step northward until it was all over.
Do you remember any specific battles that stand out to you?
Yeah, Battle of the Surigao Straits in the Philippines. It was at night, and you go shoot at each other in darkness using radar.
Which
And,
was pretty new.
Pardon?
Which was pretty new, the radar was.
You know, we used the radar to shoot. So we sunk a bunch of their ships. That was all over. And I think we're in Java. We made a ship trip down to Java and Sumatra. You know, there's oil fields down there. And we blasted away at the Japanese forces that were landed there. And we took back those oil fields. And by the time we got that, we got back to the Philippines, it was all over. So we headed back to the Navy Yard in Philadelphia, and it's all over.
That's a long trip.
Yeah.
So after the war was over and you were back in the States, you know, what's the first place you went to besides the Navy Yards?
Philadelphia. I went out of the Navy because I hadn't been home since 1939. So I went out of the Navy and got a little dissatisfied with things up in the mountains. There was no jobs. And I missed my friends. So I went back, re-enlisted in the Navy, and stayed till completed my 20 years.
Oh, what are some highlights of your career after the war?
The first job I applied for was with a stock brokerage firm, which was new, Kaufman Brothers.
I mean, while you were still in the Navy, do you remember?
What was my job during the Navy?
Yeah. What ranks did you achieve and
Chief,
places you served in the Navy?
Chief Petty Officer. We took care of personnel records, legal stuff.
Where were you based?
Pardon?
Where were you based?
In Norfolk, Virginia.
Oh, okay.
Then I served on staff of the Commander-in-Chief, U.S. Atlantic Fleet for 4 years, went back to sea for 1 year. Then I was transferred to the NATO staff there in Norfolk, Virginia.
Okay.
And I stayed there until I retired,
Very good.
working with, all the members of the NATO countries.
Yes, sir.
I was worked with the NATO officers from all the foreign countries,
Mm-hmm.
and I had a crew of 4 to 5 people in an office that did all the office work for the plans
Yeah.
division of the NATO staff.
Okay.
Ask if anybody had a
Yeah,
Bible, and you
Yeah.
said you did.
yeah. After it was all over, we were out steaming around outside of Pearl Harbor in complete darkness, and somebody says, anybody got a Bible? I said, yeah, I have one in the office, and I got it. And I opened it, and the first thing I saw was a passage in the Bible. Take us the foxes, the little foxes that spoil the vines, for our vines have tender grapes. And I thought that was doggone unusual because the night before the attack, we had a movie. And the man that was dying, the main character in the movie, he said that passage. Take us the foxes, the little foxes that spoil the vines, for our vines have tender grapes. And I didn't know that what he said, I didn't know it at the time. It came out in the Bible. And that's what I saw
Wow.
when they asked me, anybody have a Bible? I said, yeah. Opened it up, there's that passage.
Wow. The very next day, huh?
Yeah.
That gives me chills.